Well, thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here. Actually, I had this presentation worked up about 2 years ago, I think, for y'all. And then something happened with a pandemic or something. So it's been on hold for 2 years, and I've retweaked it a little bit, but hope y'all enjoy it. I have to give a caveat. It's not, if I just told you about the restoration of the habitat at the San Jacinto Battleground, take me about 10 minutes. But there's a lot more that goes along with it. It's actually why things are done there. It is a historical site, very important. But actually, in many cases, there's still a battle going on. See if I can get all this technology working. The battle is actually between several different groups. Everybody thinks that Parks and Wildlife can make all the decisions about their property. They can do whatever. No, that's really not true. There's a lot of people put a lot of pressure on Parks and Wildlife to help them manage their parks. You have the historians, especially here at San Jacinto. They want to put up a monument or a plaque or something wherever something happened. They want to stick this up. There's other people, especially the parks people, quote unquote parks. They want to have a nice mode, like a front yard. There's a purpose. There's a purpose for that. Then there's other people, such as myself, that would like to see a coastal prairie restored. This is what was at San Jacinto at the time of the battle, was a coastal tall grass prairie, blue stems, Indian grass, switchgrass. It was a lush area. There's not a whole lot of that habitat in southeast Texas, but in a lot of cases you have to compromise. So in some cases, what we did was pick and choose. There's certain areas that are historical, where the battle actually took place. Their historians take over and they can do what they want. Other places where actually the battle took place, where the armies got together and fought, they want to have a very short ground cover, to where people can walk out there and not walk through a tall grass prairie. The big problems and the management problems at San Jacinto, and somebody mentioned it before about invasives. This is Chinese tala. If you're not familiar with Chinese tala, it is a headache in southeast Texas. It's an invasive species. The other ones, there's some eastern bacchus. It's an area, a lot of blackberry vines. It is a constant battle to try to maintain the park. In a few minutes, I'll show you a lot of the reasons why they can't. Ideally, if you could take fire and manage the property very well with fire, but this is real close to industrial sites. It's right next to the Houston Ship Channel. We tried to get a burn permit. There's no way. They just laughed at us and said, not going to happen. So the only alternative they've got is to mow, and with a shredder. You can effectively manage it. It's not going to be ideal. It's not going to be perfect. But in some cases, in areas, you can see remnants of a tall grass prairie, a blue stem prairie. There's other portions way off the beaten path at San Jacinto where you can see Indian grass, switchgrass, some of these other places. This happens to be right under an Arizona ash, which I don't know why it's still out there. But anyway, enough about that. This is the reason that San Jacinto exists. If you've never, I know a lot of y'all have been to San Jacinto, but there's another event that happens every year on April 21st, the annual San Jacinto reenactment of the battle. How many of y'all have actually seen the reenactment? Huh? You're from Houston. You've seen it? How many times have you seen it? Just once? Isn't it impressive? Oh, and these people are very serious. There are well over 1 million visitors a year that visit San Jacinto Battleground. It is the most heavily attended park in the state of Texas, and you can see they're all here to witness a battle reenactment. I had a good friend from Galveston that every year took part in the battleground reenactment. He was on the Texan side, but these guys go to great lengths. They hand make their uniforms. They're all authentic. They don't even wear any jewelry, any eyeglasses, or anything, any rings. They take those off, so it's actually authentic. And they go to, it's not an act. I mean, they are serious about this. Here's, you notice the nice dress uniforms of the Mexicans. The Texans are kind of ragtag outfit. There's one thing that is noticeable in here. Sam Houston actually rode a horse into battle. So this is not 100% authentic, but it's as close as they get. As you go to the battleground and the monuments you see, this will almost bring tears to your eyes, but if you're a native Texan and you realize the significance of the things that happened at San Jacinto, actually 1/3 of the United States, the territory of Texas, New Mexico, Arizona, Nevada, California, Utah, parts of Colorado, Wyoming, Kansas, and Oklahoma, 1/3 of the United States is directly linked to what happened at San Jacinto. Not just that battle, but also the subsequent battle of the Mexican-American War, changed sovereignty. When you think about the significance there, one of the most important battles in all of the United States. This is an early photograph of the trees. This is where Sam Houston had his encampment under these trees. This is one of the earliest. Also, it says here, General Sam Houston, Santa Anna surrendered under Sam Houston under these trees, April 21st, 1836. Actually, it was 1830. It was April 22nd. They actually captured Santa Anna and he surrendered the next day. So even historians get their facts mixed up. I'm going to spend a little time because this is important about the topography around San Jacinto. This is Buffalo Bayou that leads up to downtown Houston. This is the San Jacinto River that comes in at the confluence, becomes San Jacinto Bay. This is the Texan camp back in here under these trees. This is their artillery. This is the Texas Cavalry, had advancement on this side. The Mexicans had a balustrade or a brickworks, whatever, mostly just saddles that they had that protect them behind. This was their defense right here. They had a few reserves. The other thing is the Mexican camp was here. Actually, they've just recently discovered this Mexican camp is a little bit off place. It's actually off site. It's not even on the San Jacinto. And this is just recently. They've actually found the exact location. But the Daughters of the Republic of Texas took two survivors of the battle, an old soldier and a young man, and they mapped out all this location. One thing I really want to point out, this is Burnett's homestead right here. This is Burnett's Bay. I'm going to talk a little bit more in detail about that. Just put this back in your memory. The other thing is right here. This is all extensive marsh in this area, all back in here. This is the high ground. As near as we can tell, the monument, or the big, tall monument, is somewhere along here where the main battle took place. There's a couple of other significant features. This is the road down to Galveston. This is the road down to New Washington, which was the capital of Texas at that time. How many of y'all heard of Emily Morgan? The Yellow Rose of Texas? The stories you read in the history books about she was the mulatto slave that entertained Sam Houston, and that's the reason they lost the battle. Well, I've talked to a lot of historians. Really, what really happened and why Santa Anna lost the battle, he was very arrogant. He knew that the capital of Texas at that time, including President Burnett, was down here on the road to New Washington. He took most of his troops, more than half of his troops, and went after them. They escaped and went to, now, right at this time, San Jacinto Bay and San Jacinto River and Buffalo Bayou was not navigable. There was a delta where it went into Galveston Bay, prevented any kind of boat traffic from it. So Burnett and the entire Texas legislature made their escape by going down to Red Bluff, which is close to where present-day Seabrook is, and they actually got on one of the last ships and sailed all the way to Galveston and escaped. If Santa Anna's troops had captured the legislature, it had been all over, even before the battle took place. They were so enraged, the Mexicans were so enraged, they set fire and burned the whole town of New Washington down to the ground. While they were there, the troops were very much depleted back here at San Jacinto. That's when Sam Houston advanced on Santa Anna, and that's the reason, really, they depleted troops. You never split your troops up. You divide and conquer. So because they were so depleted, the battle actually lasted only 18 minutes. The Mexicans lost something like 630 dead and about 500 and something wounded and captured. The Texans lost 9 soldiers. The biggest thing about the battle was the fact, right here, this is the Santa Ana's bayou, but this marsh, they were cut off, the Mexicans were cut off from retreating by the cavalry over here and by the advancing soldiers here. There's no place for them to go, so they retreated into the marsh. Well, that was a deep marsh at that time, and they got stuck in the marsh. And from what accounts were told, the Texans stood up on the high ground and just like shooting fish in the barrel. It was a turkey shoot. It was really horrific. Finally, the Texan commanders got in front of them, in front of their own soldiers, to make them stop, or they would have killed every one of them. That's a significant part of the battle. I think I've talked about, one more thing I want to talk about. Very little is recorded. Everybody knows the Yellow Rose of Texas, Emily Morgan. There's another woman that had a part in the battle. Her name was Peggy McCormick. This is McCormick Lake right here. This is her homestead. She actually owned the land where the battle took place. She fled before the battle and, of course, left her homestead, left all her livestock there. The livestock between the Texans and the Mexicans, they slaughtered and butchered all of her livestock. When she came back, Sam Houston was still at his campground, and she, typical Irish woman, she approached Sam Houston and said, and seeing the battle and seeing all the trash and everything at the site, how devastated her property was, she approached Sam Houston and wanted to know, what are you going to do about all this mess? And Sam Houston says, ma'am, said, don't you realize the significance of this battle? We won our Texas independence here. This will go down in history as a significant battle. She said, to hell with your history. Who's going to help me bury all the Mexicans? So I thought that was a curious thing. Being a rancher, I think that's significant too. Oops, wrong direction. Why is it going? That's what I'm pushing. Got it upside down. Okay, in early 1994, somewhere along in there, there was a committee that was formed to look at a long-range plan for the San Jacinto area, what's going to happen, what they want to do with it. You notice this is an aerial view. You notice the landscape looks pretty good. It's pretty open, a few scattered live oak trees. This is the monument that's there. That is the site of the actual battle where it took place. This little long rectangular pond, some of us on the committee call this a vanity pond, because what they wanted to do was to outdo the Washington Monument. And so has nothing to do with the battle. Has nothing to do with anything else. It's just pure vanity. One of the things we recommended is they fill this in and take care of it. But the other thing, remember the, what was it, the old commercial about the little lady who went to Wendy's and talked about where's the beef? Well, in this case, where's the marsh? There's no more marsh. There's a little thing called subsidence. The Texas Historical Commission, the Friends of the San Jacinto Battle, the Daughters of the Republic of Texas, even Parks and Wildlife wanted the marsh restored. This was a big item on their long-range plan, not only because it was historical, because the soldiers retreated in there and it was part, and when they described the battle, you know, everybody wants to know, where's the marsh? Well, what happened is a little thing called subsidence, where the land actually shrinks and goes down. Remember I told you about Burnett Bay? There's after World War II, there was a subdivision that went in around Burnett Bay on the land. Very beautiful homes in that area, right next to the water. Very pleasant community. And I mentioned the word was. The fact that subsidence worked on it, and it actually settled at least 10 to 12 feet. This is not flooding. This is actually on a low tide. High tide, you can't even get into that area. And all those houses are completely gone. Very beautiful homes. So how do we restore a marsh? In the hill country, when we talk about plant communities, you look at climate and soils, and that's going to determine what you're going to grow, whether it's steep rocky ground or bottomland hardwoods or open prairie, deep prairies. Along the coastal marsh, it's water elevation and salinity are going to determine what kind of marsh. And I didn't discover this myself. I went to Louisiana because Louisiana, there's experts in Louisiana on restoring wetlands and restoring coastal marsh. I learned a lot from those guys. This is actually on Anahuac National Wildlife Refuge. They get about 3 foot of erosion per year on this land, washing away. It's very low land, but you notice the volunteers are planting a plant called smooth cordgrass. We've got a few sprigs of it here. Does not, or we thought, did not produce viable seed, so you have to sprig it, much as you plant rice or anything else like that. And we had a nursery established in Baytown where we grew sprigs of this, just like y'all have your native plants. We grew sprigs of this to where we could take them out of the nursery and go out and plant. Very labor intensive, but if you do it right, you wind up with a nice, pretty coastal marsh to begin with. All the way back to now, what do we do with the marsh, restoring the marsh at the San Jacinto Monument? Ted Hollingsworth and I were both on the committee. He was the natural resource manager for Parks and Wildlife for all the parks in Southeast Texas. He came to me and we worked out a deal and said, well, what we've got to do is restore the elevation of the salt marsh. This water is probably 5-6 feet deep. The only way we can do it is build and take soil and put it back and build it back up. The other reason, and really the main reason the Parks and Wildlife wanted to restore this marsh is this is a big headache. This pond, the Vanity Pond, it was a maintenance nightmare for Parks and Wildlife too, because every time they had a big rain, they had to pump it out. It was stagnant water. It was terrible. Well, this is tidal water. It goes in and out with the tide. In the spring of the year, when the water gets real hot, there's a thing called biological oxygen demand, where the fish no longer have enough oxygen to support themselves, and every year they would have big fish kills. Well, that was embarrassing for the Parks and Wildlife to have a fish kill on a part of their Parks and Wildlife property. Not only that, when all the fish died, then that became excellent mosquito breeding habitat. And The mosquitoes at certain times of the year, especially in the evening, would carry you off. Back up one time. So Ted and I came up with a rough ballpark estimate of what it would take to restore the marsh, haul in dirt, and the hand sprig. We came up with an estimate between $1.2 and $1.3 million. And everybody says, we don't have that kind of money. So the whole project was put on a kind of a back burner. In the meantime, there was a thing called the Houston-Galveston Navigation Channel Project, which I was also a part of, looked at deepening and widening the Houston Ship Channel all the way from the Gulf of Mexico, past Galveston, all the way through Galveston Bay, all the way up the channel, all the way up to the Turning Basin, which is in downtown Houston, deepening and widening it from 40 feet to 45 feet, from around 400 feet to 530 feet wide. Lots of material to take to. There's a lot of details in this map. There's a lot of things that went on, but there was a team of us that were formed. The Corps of Engineers, Port of Houston, Fish and Wildlife Service, EPA, Texas Parks and Wildlife, the General Land Office, my agency, which changed its name to NRCS, and NOAA Fisheries, formed a committee to see what we could do about beneficial using this material rather than disposing of it, whatever, and was called the Beneficial Uses Group. We came up with the idea of why not, if it's good material, if it's clean, why not build marsh with it? First step in that process was to build a levee to containment, and we had stiff clay, and I actually saved some of this material. I'm going to pass it around. This is actual dredge material that was used and dug up out of the channel. It's clean. It's not nasty stuff, but you pass it around and look at it. That's after it's dried completely. But after this levee is built, then you go in and pump the fluid material in. This fluid material looks a whole lot like latex paint. It's about the same consistency. You can't work with it immediately. You have to let it settle and consolidate until it gets to about the consistency between chocolate pudding and peanut butter. Now remember the picture I showed you of the kids out there planting in that. You can't really plant sprig on this. In the meantime, I came up with some ideas. I read some literature up in New England where they took smooth cordgrass seed and actually treat it to get it to germinate. Now it's not normal dormancy like you would think of normal grass seed. You actually harvest it green when it's in a hard dough stage. Put it in salt water, brine water, at about 15 parts per thousand, which is about half the strength of seawater. Keep it in refrigeration for about 3 months, and it will germinate. It will actually germinate there. It's not dormant. It's called, technical term is recalcification. It's a technical term where it goes into, and this is what it looks like. That little flotation boat that you saw in the previous picture. We took that seed, took about 5 pounds of seed and spread it over that about 150 acre marsh, and this is what it looks like after about 1 year. We want to do the same thing with San Jacinto, and actually San Jacinto was actually before the pictures I showed you there. You think it's just all you have to do is stick a pipe in the ground, a dredge, and just start pumping. Well, you've got to do a couple of things first. One of the things is called the Clean Water Act. You've got to comply with that because you're dredge and fill out of the channel. It's pretty muddy water. You have to come up with a plan how you're going to dispose of it. The permit is called a 404, Section 404 of the Clean Water Act. There's also navigable, has something to do with navigable waters. That's in Section 10. Part of that is you've got to get permission, a permit through the Corps of Engineers. Then you've got to get all these agencies to sign off of it. Of course, Parks and Wildlife, they said, go for it. Fish and Wildlife, good habitat, they said, go for it. Of course, the Corps of Engineers said, yeah, we're all in favor of that. Who else? Parks, National Marine Fisheries said that's good, excellent habitat. The EPA and the TECQ, which is environmental quality for the state of Texas, they said, well, we want you to do a sample out there and look at the material and make sure there's not any contaminants in it. And the Port of Houston said, we'll do that. We'll pick up the tab for that. And it turns out there was a little bit of elevation in nitrites, but that's to be expected. All of this is runoff from the city of Houston. You'd expect a little bit of that, but to us botanists, that's fertilizer in many cases. Then we ran across an agency called the General Land Office, and they said, well, according to the Texas Open Beaches Act, anything subtidal in the state of Texas belongs to the state of Texas. When you pump material in there and build the elevation up, it no longer comes under our authority. And we said, well, the last time we checked, Parks and Wildlife is still a state agency. And they said, that doesn't make any difference. It's out of our control. For about 3 months, we ran into a roadblock, and they would not move. It's not the commissioner of the Texas General Land Office. It's a bunch of lawyers in Austin. The only way we could get it resolved was for Parks and Wildlife to sign a lease. And they actually leased this land from the General Land Office so we could build our marsh. Also, by the way, too, there's a couple of course, the Port of Houston had some area right next to the San Jacinto battle ground that they needed to dredge. They contributed to that. There was also a Houston Barge and Marine Terminal, which is right across the channel. They said we've got a dock that needs to be dredged. We'll contribute material to it. There was also a San Jacinto Energy Corporation, NRG, had a power plant right next to it. They had an intake barge canal that needed to be dredged. We'll contribute to it. They paid for the dredging. Normally, you have to pay to have dispose of this stuff, but because the Parks and Wildlife would accept the material, they could dispose of the material and it wouldn't cost them anything. So actually, from $1.3 million, what it was going to cost in 1994, we got this done for absolutely nothing. I wished I had some pictures. Ted and I took some of the seed and planted it. I do not have any pictures of that. I regret that, but this is before we had the hovercraft. We had to crawl out on this material, kind of do a GI crawl. We were covered in mud. Didn't take a picture of ourselves, but afterwards, this is what it looks like 1 year after the establishment of, and this is all returning it back to a salt marsh, native habitat. When we got through, everybody was absolutely overjoyed with it. University of Houston at Clear Lake decided, you know what? We want to make a trail out there. We want to take people out on this marsh and show them what's going on, like a lot of the trails. So we said, sure. We got grants from the Galveston Bay Foundation, a group called the Fish and Wildlife Foundation. Some other people contributed. And actually, we got a trail, a boardwalk established across this marsh. It's about a 3-mile loop all the way across and around and looks at several different habitats. Because of that, we got from the Secretary of Interior gave us a Coastal Americas Award. Lynn Scarlett, we didn't get the Secretary of Interior to come out, but we got Lynn Scarlett with, she was Assistant Secretary of the Interior. She came out and brought us the plaque, and we had a nice ceremony on the site. In addition to that, when she came back, she also brought the little blue folder back behind that is a signed letter from George W. Bush, the White House, congratulating us on the restoration of the marsh and the trail that we created. When I was working on this talk 2 years ago, my wife Jackie and I made a trip down there. This is what it looks like. Well, I haven't been back since 2019, but the marsh is still doing wonderful. It's still there, functioning. The other thing that's significant, the fisheries habitat. We no longer have a fish kill out there because the marsh shades the water, keeps it a lot cooler. We walked across that boardwalk, not one single mosquito bite anywhere. So when you restore a habitat and get it right, everything works great. Since that time, I've not been back, but we only did about 85 acres. The rest of it, about another 100 acres, is going to be restored. There's a private company that actually has done that. They need more dredging, and they've actually restored the rest of the marsh. Some of y'all are birders. This site and another small area of habitat that we restored set the record for the number of Nelson's sharp-tailed sparrows. They're a real reclusive. They're not in danger or anything, but they're very reclusive. But this is their habitat. We set the record on the Christmas bird count one year, over 250 pairs of salt marsh sparrows out there, Nelson's sharp-tailed sparrows. That's about the end of my talk. Right after, I didn't get to see this, the battleground was closed back in 2019 because of refinery fire. Maybe you've heard about it. Lightning struck the refinery, burned several tank farms up. The monument and the battleground is still in danger. There's a lot of things that could still threaten it. It's an isolated habitat. There's Occidental Petroleum's got a site right next to it. Of course, the Houston Ship Channel. It's really an isolated habitat. If you get a chance to go down there, and I hope you get a chance to walk the trails and see the trail and see the salt marsh that's out there. I guess. The what? The battleship, the Texas battleship. The battleship is still there. It's right adjacent. If you remember the photograph, it's just off of the photograph. It's in a slip. They did several years ago. They collected cans. Kids all over the state of Texas collected cans to restore it. It just barely made it to Galveston. They refitted it, fixed it up, brought it back, so it's still there. Got questions? Where's the vanity pond? The vanity pond is right next to the monument. They didn't get rid of it? No, they haven't gotten rid of it yet. I would, huh? Yeah. Yeah, it costs a lot of money to get dirt and bring dirt in there. Yeah. Yeah. It's one of those things you have to compromise on. Yeah. Yeah. No. That's the thing about salt marshes are resilient. I mean, they're designed to take hurricane surges. If you think about it, the storm surge is going over the top of them. In fact, my friends in Louisiana, when they talk about their salt, and they've lost a lot of salt marsh in Louisiana, for every 1 mile of marsh that's south of New Orleans will dissipate the hurricane tidal surge about a foot. So it acts as a shock absorber. It's a natural barrier rather than putting concrete or bulkheads or anything else up like that. It's a much better effective tool for, it's back to natural. Yeah. Yeah, we got you. Yes. Yeah. No, they had completely switched. Subsidence was the issue because of groundwater extraction. A lot of the chemical plants took a lot of water out, and it's very shallow aquifer. And when that, it's not like an open cave or something. It's just porous sand. And when it collapses, it's not going to come back. And it collapses, and it's not going to. But they have switched from groundwater all the way to surface water. They get most of the water out of Lake Houston, Lake Conroe.
So it's not, the subsidence is not currently occurring?
To a small extent, maybe an inch or two, but it's very, not like 10 to 12 feet, no.
It seems to me it would be valuable to increase the diversity of plants in the saltwater marsh.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Is there a native plant group that might be interested in helping with that? Or will it just occur naturally?
All right, this occurs naturally. This is a little higher marsh that we're looking at here, which is actually Spartina patens, which is salt marsh cordgrass. The Spartina alterniflora is right in the lowest part, intertidal. That's alterniflora. That's salt. Well, this is prairie cordgrass. But anyway, they're two different species. This we didn't plant. This has come in naturally. But once you get the conditions right, a lot of the things will happen over a period of time. Anything else? Yeah. Have what? Yeah. On the boardwalk, you're fine. I would not get out off the boardwalk though. Yeah. Yep. In this particular area, we have not seen any alligators. Alligators are very reclusive. They're way out. This is a heavily industrialized site. They're not going to be there that much. They don't like people that much. Yeah.
I'm just curious about climate change. If there's been any
Climate change, I don't know. I don't want to get political. Whether sea level rise, relative to sea level rise, will do the same thing as subsidence. But it's relatively minor compared to the subsidence from the groundwater extraction. But you can see it'll have the same effect. Any other questions? Yes.
Now that your presentation so much, we a couple of times a month we go out to James Steele Park.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And go right past the place that has the sign, the Seidensticker.
Yes.
Cemetery.
Yeah. That's my uncle. That's my uncle.
Uncle?
Yep. You turn over a rock in the hill country and you'll find a Seidensticker. In fact, all the places we've lived, it's curious, Seidensticker is a very unusual name. And I tell them, you go to Comfort and open up the phone book, there are more Seidenstickers in the phone book than there are Smith and Jones put together. Yeah.
I am absolutely intrigued with what you just presented. To think that you can take somebody's problem, like the fact that the canal needed to be wide or whatever, and turn it into your solution.
Oh yeah.
I just wonder how that could be transferred over.
Believe me, it's being transferred all over the United States. That slide that I showed you, I presented a talk in San Diego on salt marsh restoration. I've done one in New Orleans. In fact, I did a presentation in New Orleans just a little bit, about a month or so before Katrina hit. And that's the thing we talked about, and everybody at the conference knew it's not if, it's going to be when. And sure enough, Katrina happened. All the plans that were laid out there, they just went by the Bayside and nothing. Nobody followed the plans.
It's simple when you're talking about it, and it is.
Yes.
Moving it from one place to another.
Right.
And it doesn't take any really high-tech stuff to do it.
That's right. They're talking, believe me, the people in New Orleans, the Corps of Engineers, they're talking about taking the dredge material out of the Mississippi River and doing the same. It's a little bit complicated because when you do that, you upset one habitat with another. Yeah. The oystermen, for instance, they, you cover an oyster bed with a couple of feet of sediment, and they're not going to survive. So there's always pros and cons. There's always complications.
Now, the fact that you got so many agencies to work together.
Yeah, that's amazing. Oh, it is. Each year we had a get together. You know, it's the acronyms we had for BUG. The guy that headed the committee was with the Port of Houston. He was an environmental manager. He was Italian, and he would always fix us spaghetti. And we'd have a spaghetti, and we call it the bug spaghetti. The first time my wife came there and said, "We're going to have bug spaghetti?" Yes.
How long did the project take to move that earth, and how many tons or whatever?
Cubic yards of material, probably, it was a small project. The San Jacinto, only about maybe a couple of thousand cubic yards material. Dredging probably would accomplish in about a week. And you have to, that's the other thing, you have to calculate how much you fill up to wind up when it settles and consolidates to the right elevation. We had engineers help us with Turner, Colleen, Braden, which is a big engineering firm in Houston, also a dredging consultant, Gahagan and Bryan out of Tampa, Florida. They helped us a lot with the calculations. So, and thankfully we got it right. I think, oh, there's one other thing I was going to talk about. Oh, you hit the plug? One thing I did fail to mention, see if I can back up. Isn't technology wonderful? Anyway, if you remember one of the photographs, there was a little tidal channel that went through the salt marsh. You remember seeing that? That is the restoration of Santa Ana's bio. It actually came back. It was open water, but because of the unconsolidated fill that came through, Santa Ana's bio actually came back. Right there. That is actually Santa Ana's bio came back. That is the tidal channel that was restored. We had no idea it was going to happen, but that goes all the way, and that's how the fish actually have access to the marsh.
How many years does it take to get all the coordination with the organization?
For this, probably about 2 years to get all the permits and get everybody's approval and find out. Probably about 2 years. Yeah, things don't happen in a hurry.
I'm so familiar with New Orleans. I was there for 25 years.
Yeah.
And the size of that delta out there.
Yeah, it's huge.
Yeah, so how in the world would they be able to even do that?
You take a pipe, you take a pipe over the levee and just let it spill and let it go. Just like the pipe here. And you can pump that material for miles. And if it's too far, you can put a booster pump in between and boost the material. And you can take it 5 or 6 miles. It can be done. It's relatively cheap. As long as it's good, clean material too. That's the other thing you have to be aware of. Dredge material isn't nasty. I think that the thing I passed around, you can see that dredge material is actually fairly clean. Yeah, there it is. Now this is clay, but it came out of the bottom of the ship channel, and it's still breaking apart. That was pretty wet when it came out, and let it dry. It's been drying for about 15 years. So, any other questions? I think that's about, yeah.
So this silt and water was pumped out from the channel over a levee.
Just a natural levee. It's not a constructed. It's just a natural levee. We did have to confine the material. Back right in through here, we had to build a weir to hold the solid material, and that weir acted as a sediment weir, and the clean water flowed over the top of it and held the material back behind. You can't just turn it loose. That's right. And here's actually the outlet for the channel is way down here, and that's where it comes out. We had a secondary weir here but the primary rear was back up here. Yeah, believe me, we had enough people looking at us to make sure we weren't releasing any sediment back into the bay.
So, and now they're talking about a new project that the Army Corps of Engineers wants to do. It's supposed to make Houston more,
Yeah,
prevent hurricane damage,
well,
ship channel or something.
yeah, they're talking about putting a dike all the way down here at Galveston, all the way across. And just like the dikes in Holland to hold back the North Sea, it'll periodically open and close like a channel lock.
Yeah.
And when the storm surge comes, they'll close it, but otherwise they have to keep it open for ship traffic to get through. It's going to cost a ton of money.
It had baffles or something.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That's it. How am I doing on time?